We all know that people in the olden days were obsessed with torture. I guess everyone was bored because Netflix hadn't been invented yet, so people spent loads of time coming up with the most creative ways to kill people. You sure didn't want to commit a crime back in those days, you just didn't know how you were going to be punished for it. But what was the worst form of torture ever invented? We're going to take a painfully close look at the world's worst torture device, but be warned, sensitive people will think this is a pretty difficult watch. Throughout history, it seems like civilizations were competing to find the most gruesome ways to kill each other, and they were really good at it too. The Romans and the Spanish Inquisition loved their molten gold torture. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The victim was tied down and molten gold was poured down their throat. It's pretty terrible, but at least the victim died almost immediately. A slower method of torture was the Roman candle, which was a favorite torture method of Emperor Nero. Basically, he just loved using humans as giant flaming torches at his parties. The Dutch invented torture by rat in the 17th century, where they'd attach a cage with a rat inside it to their victim's stomach. Then they'd heat the cage up to force the rat to chew through the person's stomach to escape the fire. The Aztecs, Chinese, and Assyrians preferred to skin people alive. When done right by a skilled executioner, victims could survive for days with all their skin pulled off their bodies. In India, they chose death by elephant. The elephants were actually trained to trample people to death as slowly as possible. The Vikings might have practiced something known as the blood eagle, which is even worse than it sounds. The skin was peeled off their back, their ribs broken at their spine, and then their lungs were pulled through the gap and out of their body to form what looked like two bloody wings. But the award for the most horrific form of torture actually goes to the ancient Greeks. The credit for it goes to two people, both mentioned in the Bibliotheca Historica, a collection of books from the time that described the history of the world up to that point. It literally translates to historical library, and the whole collection was written by one man, Diodorus Siculus. Amazingly, the books are really well preserved, considering they're so old. And while some bits are damaged or missing, we have them to thank for a lot of knowledge about the ancient world. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't know about this gruesome form of ancient Greek torture. According to these books, this terrible torture device was made by a professional inventor named Perilos of Athens. He was looking to make a bit of cash. After all, being an inventor is a pretty tough business. So he took his idea for a torture device to a man named Phalaris, the tyrant of Acrogas. With a name like that, there's no doubt the inventor had found the right target audience for his new creation. The tyrant was more than happy to pay a huge stack of cash to help the inventor build his creation. After all, torture was his hobby. Some say he even enjoyed eating human children, so he probably hoped this invention would be the worst ever. But what was this torture device? It's now known as the Brazen Bull. You might have heard it called a different name before, maybe the Bronze Bull or the Sicilian Bull, but they're all referring to the same terrifying invention. Somewhere between 570 and 554 BC, the inventor finished building this terrifying device. Its name gives you a good clue about what it looked like. It was just a life-sized bronze statue of a bull. That doesn't sound very dangerous, but its appearance was hiding something. The statue was hollow and featured a door on its side. The idea was that prisoners would be put inside the statue and the door would be shut and securely locked, obviously. They'd have to sit curled up in a ball inside, but that wasn't their main concern. Once they were inside, a fire would be lit underneath the bronze bull. You're getting the idea now. The bull was basically just a huge, super hot oven. The prisoner who was unlucky enough to be stuck inside the bull's belly would be slowly roasted alive. You've probably worked out that this wasn't the type of torture designed to get information. It was just there to execute people in the worst way possible. If that wasn't bad enough, the inventor added a few creative touches to his creation. Firstly, the smoke would leave the bull through its nostrils, which had incense stashed inside them. I guess that's because even though people want to watch a man get roasted, they don't want to smell him cooking. But even worse than that, there was a device inside the bull's head that would capture, distort, and amplify the screams of the tortured man, so they'd sound like an animal howling in pain as they died. I know, it's pretty gruesome. As a cherry on top, the inventor suggested that any bones that were left should be turned into bracelets. But the story doesn't end there. The best part only happens after the bull is delivered to the tyrant. The inventor was pretty happy with this creation. When the tyrant saw what he'd made, legend has it, he was appalled. Apparently, he said that he hated the idea of such unimaginable cruelty. If a man who eats children thinks your invention is too cruel, then you know you've invented something pretty evil. So the tyrant asked the inventor to step inside the bull so he could test the sound system. While the inventor was inside, the tyrant shut the door and lit the fire. The inventor was probably killed inside his own bull. Some sources say the tyrant pulled the inventor out of the bull before he was too seriously injured, only to then kill him by pushing him over a cliff. But another plot twist was coming up. When the tyrant was finally overthrown, Legend has it he was also executed inside the bull he'd paid for. In the end, the two people who'd contributed to the creation of this terrible device were both killed by the thing they'd made. I guess there's some kind of justice in that. But even though the creators were dead, the bull lived on. Apparently, when the Romans heard about it, they were delighted. It's said they used it a lot, particularly to punish Christians. Of course, a while later, the Romans converted to Christianity themselves, but not before killing loads of people for believing in Jesus. One of the people they cooked alive in a bronze animal was Saint Eustace. He once worked for the Roman emperor, but one day saw a vision of a stag and a crucifix. He decided to convert to Christianity after that, but he became a martyr who was tested to his limits by God. He lost everything he owned and then lost his wife and his 2 kids as well. Apparently, they were taken away by a wolf and a lion. Some stories say he eventually got them back, but that turned out to not be a good thing. When the Emperor Hadrian found him, he knew just what to do with him. He would roast him and his whole family in a bronze bull. Not all sources say that his wife and children were also roasted, so let's hope those were the correct ones. Nobody wants to see a child roasted alive. Either way, this is where the story changes and a miracle occurred. According to Christian sources, when the family was placed inside the bull and the fire was lit, nobody heard any screaming coming through the sound system. Instead, they just heard a prayer. Apparently, the praying continued for 3 days before the voices stopped. When the bull was opened, the people were shocked to discover that the family didn't have a single burn. They were dead, but they sure didn't look like they'd been in a bronze oven for 3 days. It's up to you to decide if you believe these stories. Historians don't know much about the bull, but we do know that no genuine brazen bull exists today. If you ever see one, you can bet it was made recently to give you a glimpse at what they might have looked like, so nobody was ever cooked alive inside it. But it still might be a little too real for some people. Did we miss another horrific torture device? Which form of torture is your favorite? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another weird but true story.